Right now, we go for global business updates, and Rotus Oddiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus. I hope you got fuel between yesterday and today.
I bought fuel, a while back, so I'm still, thankfully,
still
my tank is still good. Ayo, good morning to you. Good morning to Rufai. Good morning to Vimbai and all our viewers out there. And I'm glad the Daily Trust brought that up as their front page story on fuel scarcity. It's still a problem. But internationally, let's start with Asia, Japan. Japanese stocks, the Nikkei 225, a healthy 3% gain. It's looking like it's going to have its best week in 4 years. Japan leading the way as far as the equity space in Asia is concerned. So Shanghai, look, China still has its problems. So you can see the Shanghai Composite Index in mainland China down about 8 basis points. So that fell, but everyone else was in the positive zone. So as I mentioned, the Nikkei 225 in Japan up by 3.64. The Kospi up by almost 2%. The Hang Seng up by 1.8. The ASX S&P 200 in Asia up. So why Asian stocks up? It was basically what the data they saw from the U.S. We'll get to the U.S. data. Very encouraging economic figures coming out there. And as Kamala Harris is going to be releasing her economic plans later today in North Carolina, I'm sure that they will be bringing that up. An interesting story I saw coming out of Malaysia. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim made an announcement this morning that they will be making a revision to public sector salaries to the tune of about $2.3 billion. So that was announced this morning. Now, if you look at the details of civil servant salaries and what the increase is going to be, they haven't done this in about 10 years. The last time they basically raised the minimum wage or raised salaries in Malaysia was 2012. So it's the first time this is taking place, right? They're looking at a 15% hike for mid-level civil servants, a 7% hike for senior level civil servants, and going forward, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim said that increase in salaries, promotions, and so on will be based on performance and not seniority, right? So they're going, very metric here, very metadata. I just thought this was so interesting. If you look at the public sector for Malaysia, as far as public sector details, so Malaysia has a population of 33 million people. It's a rich country. I mean, for its population, GDP is about 400 billion. So if you divide, GDP per capita is almost $12,000 per person. Their labor force is just 17 million, 17.2. Their civil servants is 1.6 million. Minimum wage right now, the currency is the Malaysian ringgit. It trades at about 4 to $1. So $1 gets you 4 ringgit. So if you divide their minimum wage, it's about $345. And if you want to compare here at 1,500 naira, minimum wage there is about 500K, 500,000. So with these changes to the minimum wage in Malaysia, they're going to about 2,000. That would take their minimum wage to about $460. But something else that's interesting, I will revisit this on Monday. When we talk about the size, just keeping things on Malaysia's public sector, when we talk about Nigeria's government being too big, Nigeria's public sector civil servants are only about 720,000. I think it's under 1 million, right? So I had an interview with Dr. Ben Akabweze, the Director General of Budget Office. This was a while back. I'll dig it up on Monday. Let's go back into that, because when we talk about, you're looking at Nigeria with 200 million people and a civil servants pool of less than 1 million, and in Malaysia of 33 million, less than a third of Nigeria's population, and they have more civil servants at 1.7. So it's just interesting. But look, Malaysia is a wealthy country. We'll be getting more details on how these things move forward over there. Let's get to the U.S. This is what triggered Asian markets, other markets across the board. Yesterday's close, the Dow Jones Industrial Average 1.3% gain, the S&P 500 1.6. I think this is like the fourth weekly gain or so, third or fourth for the S&P 500. The Nasdaq at 2.4. What was the reason for this? Retail sales came in. The U.S. consumer is still flexing. So 1% climb for retail sales in July, beating estimates of 0.3%. You can see the contraction in June at 0.2. So you can see U.S. inflation is decelerating. Retail sales look to be picking up. Jobless claims. Remember what happened when the non-farm payrolls came out a couple Fridays ago, and there was all kinds of turmoil where everybody said, there's a U.S. recession coming and this and that. So the number of people seeking assistance who are out of work came in at about 277,000. The market was expecting 235,000, and you can see the prior there at 234. So that came in under the estimates, meaning that there are less people in America who are asking for assistance while they are out of work. Again, the data tells you a whole lot. We get to Nigeria. I think Rufai mentioned this when he was talking about something in the headlines. So we've finally seen a deceleration now in Nigeria's year-on-year inflation. So you look at year-on-year, 33.4% for headline, 34.19 was what it was in June. Now, I know that, look, prices are still rising. Nobody should say because there's a deceleration that somehow prices are coming down. Remember, in Nigeria, where prices go up, they're like a rocket. When they come down, they're like a feather, right? So it is just the pace at which prices are rising. So 33.4. Food inflation has decelerated to 39.53, down from 40.87. And you can see core inflation, urban and rural, also coming down. For month on month, kind of a similar story. Headline inflation decelerating to 2.2% from 2.3, food inflation 2.4 from 2.5, and then not quite the same for the other metrics. They kind of stayed sticky for core inflation and urban and rural. But something I did want to bring up, Ayo did ask, there was a guest you had yesterday that was talking about how things would change tomorrow, and Ayo asked him about Ghana's inflation path to deceleration versus Nigeria. And we talked about this with a guest in Accra. Take a look at these two charts in terms of how well Ghana has managed their inflation. We talk about the Jollof Wars and the Super Eagles versus the Black Stars, but Ghana is beating us in terms of how well they've reduced inflation. So if you look at your first chart on your screen there, in terms of headline inflation, you can see the direction in which both countries are going. So Ghana, going back to July of last year, year-on-year inflation, 43.1%. They've been able to bring that down to 20.9. Ghana just released their headline inflation number just 2 days ago, and we went over it. You can see Nigeria going from 24.08% in July last year up to 33.4. Again, that was higher, but it's come down. But still, look at food inflation. Ghana's food inflation, you should have the chart in front of you, 55% year-on-year in July 2023. They've managed to bring that down to 21.5%. Nigeria, 26.98 in July of last year at 39.53. So again, it's all about the currency. It's all about being able to, Ghana has gotten assistance from the IMF, hello Vimbai, and also assistance from other institutions that are able to bring money into Ghanaian coffers. So the CD has appreciated. Ghana is getting, the currency is appreciated, and you're now seeing fall in food prices over in Ghana. So there's some lessons for us to be learned there. Just to round off, we had the launch of the domestic US dollar bond yesterday. Wale Edu, Minister of Finance, led the way on that. That was launched. The auction will take place on Monday. Basically, we've been through all the details. $10,000 minimum to buy into the bond. They're looking to benchmark the interest rates, the coupons at Eurobond levels. And it's open to Nigerians here in the diaspora and so on and so forth. And then again, just to round off, shout out to Daily Trust. I'm glad to see that after our reports, there are still, headlines reminding people that there is still fuel scarcity in this country, and it's something that needs to be addressed. That's our update.
I mean, very apt that Daily Trust reports. There's still a lot of fuel scarcity. So when you hear some other headlines saying Mele Kyari is the savior of the universe, he's helped us produce 60,000 barrels per day and all of that. Mele Kyari, I've got nothing against you. We don't hate you. On the part you failed, we tell you. Funny. I mean, you've not done well in some regards. The supply issue has been consistent, and it's been a recurring decimal for over a year. At some point, we had bad fuel and all of that. You helped with 60,000 barrels, but please do not forget that the target is supposed to be over 2 million barrels per day. We can't even meet our OPEC quota here.
Rufai, what's the capacity of Port Harcourt refinery? Isn't it 60,000? That hasn't been launched.
But it's not been launched.
What numbers are we playing with?
So when we say he's failed as regards that, they start to say we hate him. I don't hate you. I love you, Mr. Mele Kyari. I love you.
Rescue the country.
But all I'm just saying to you is get the job done. The refineries ain't working. You promised 4 years ago that you were going to get them fixed. They're not working today. All right? They are touting your success. They say, oh, you were the one that started issuing out the audited report of the refineries all this year. Are you not going to issue the audit before? Should we praise you for that? That a government institution will not be releasing audit?
You're supposed to be releasing auditing reports.
So should we praise you for that? Because they touted that as part of your achievement. I'm like, hello? Should we
As an
praise you
achievement
for
to
that?
release audited reports, something that you get suspended for on the NGX.
On the NGX.
Your
So
number.
please, just get it done. We've got nothing against you. But I keep telling you, like I say yesterday, never ascribe to malice what you can explain with incompetence. Y'all are incompetent. It's not malice. Moving on. As regards the FG bond. Yes, we are going to the bond market again, but Rotus, I also have a problem with that. What are we doing with the money? If this situation didn't happen with the Chinese now, are we even going to know that Nigeria has even ventured to buy any jets? So it's always about what we're doing with the money. Collecting the loans is not a bad thing in the first place. I mean, you were talking about IMF. Went to IMF recently. Ethiopia went to IMF. They devalued their bearer too. But the question is, what are they doing with the money? What are we doing with the money? And we must look at that critically. And in all fairness, I think Joe Biden is not giving his flowers enough for the American economy. He's coming at a time that things were very dire. He stabilized the economy. And that's when I heard the rhetoric of the Labour Party in England. I think they are just talking. Give it to Rishi Sunak. He's also stabilized the economy. Bringing inflation down is no joke at all. Also give it to the Ghanaians. We have been battling with inflation here. However way they've been able to do it, at least they have done it. When we see results, we celebrate results. Yeah. That's just all we want. Never ascribe to malice what you can explain with incompetence.
When we see results, we celebrate results. And that's why I must highlight that for the first time in months, inflation has decelerated. Not quite the numbers we're looking at yet, but at least it shows that some of the interventions by the CBN seem to be working. We've analyzed the number of times increasing rates, and very shortly we're going to be having a conversation with the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria to see the impact of these increases, but we now see its impact on inflation. And so I must mention that. And it gives a sense of hope, at least that finally we're heading in the right direction, and we need, commensurate fiscal policy that would help to shore up the monetary policy that's in place to bring down inflation. We're not yet there yet, but at least we must celebrate our small wins. So good news right there. But let me talk about Malaysia this morning, Rotus. You talk about the adjustment in civil servant wages as announced by the Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. Do you know why these adjustments are taking place from December 1? Because the government is looking at diesel subsidy cuts. In order to mitigate the impact and effect of diesel subsidy costs, fuel subsidy cuts in Malaysia, the government is being proactive by ensuring that they do the first things first, increase wages, and also increase financial aid to the most needy. This means that when the time comes and it will drive inflation in terms of the diesel fuel subsidy cuts, they are better prepared. I say this because the argument again and again for fuel subsidy removal in Nigeria has been that conversation around preparation and the way in which it is being done. You can say, yeah, Malaysia is a rich country, but beyond it being a rich country is the fact that there's proper planning, there's proper economic planning, so that the shocks on the people or on inflation would not be unbearable. And so just wanted to highlight that there and see if there are lessons that we can learn from that. So yes, public sector salary hike is happening, but it's happening as a result of the fact that following that, there will be fuel subsidy cuts. Then finally, let me also mention that I love the idea, and I must say that in Nigeria, the idea of performance-based salary increment or adjustment. Remember that just this year in May, the Director General of the National Productivity Center had said that Nigeria is actually considering that as well, so that civil servants on the same grade might not necessarily earn the same amount of money based on their performance. We talk about lack of productivity in the civil service. Perhaps this might be an incentive to check in that. And even though, there's a lot of consultation that might happen, hopefully NLC, Organized Labour, will support this, but I think this is a good way forward for Nigerians. It's unfair for people on the same grade who are working, but one person is absolutely not being productive, and the other is being productive and they're earning the same amount of money. There should be some performance-based metric for how salaries are reviewed in addition to the minimum wage. So a few things and a few lessons we can learn from the Malaysian story. And so thanks a lot for bringing that up this morning.
Right. My take is on inflation, and I'm so glad that, Rotus, you clarified that this is a decrease in the increase, if you get what I mean. So this is not a negative we're not going to see prices coming down, because a lot of people have the perception that, okay, now that they're saying inflation has eased, then why are we not seeing prices coming down in the market? So thank you so much for clarifying the fact that it just means that the rate at which prices were increasing has decreased. So very important point to make. Now, when we look at Ghana and we look at Nigeria, I was reading up on Ghana and I was shocked, just as you brought out, at how much food inflation is contributing to the entire basket, which is a similar problem that we're facing here in Nigeria. Now, when you look at some of the common factors, one thing we're not giving enough credit is climate change, because Ghana is currently, parts of Ghana, the Volta region and so forth, are currently experiencing a drought. And if you do a little bit of reading, you find that there's some parts of Nigeria as well who are currently facing either drought or what they're calling weather whiplash, which is an interchange between sudden flooding followed by sudden dry spells, which has also impacted the rise in food inflation. So, the conversation goes back to climate change. What are we doing? So yesterday we spoke about the VAT-free import of food and so forth, which is all great, but what are we doing in the medium and long term beyond fertilizer? This is bigger than fertilizer and tractors. This is about what are we doing to plan for the fact that the weather conditions and the conditions in which we need to farm and produce food are changing. They're probably never going to go back to what they used to be. So are we going and creating seed that is resistant to certain weather conditions? Are we going to look at ways to do dry farming and dry planting during the rainy season to keep the cycles going? What is the agricultural plan we have where it concerns our basic necessities? We know the grains and the rice, and we know the things that are staples and that we need to maintain a steady and consistent supply of food in Nigeria. So I think it's also important when we're looking at that inflation, because it's driven by food inflation. That's one thing that President Nana Akufo did a good job of. He made sure that he got involved in the farming process. It's more than what's monetary policy going to do for us. It's more than about the interest rates, but it's also just about looking at a holistic approach. And that's why we keep saying to the federal government, as much as we're saying, yes, decrease your spending and so forth, that's the part they have to play, because we're looking at them and we're saying, great, okay, you say you're giving fertilizers and farming implements and so forth, but what is the real long-term solution to the fact that the climate is changing and it's impacting our food security? So that's my take on that.
Thank you so much, Rotus. Never scrap to malice what you can explain with incompetence.